Question 4. A college claims that 60% of its students prefer online classes over in-person classes. A researcher surveys 150 students and finds that 84 students prefer online classes. At a significance level of alpha equals 0.05, test whether the true proportion of students who prefer online classes is different than the college's claim. Okay, so we've only talked about one proportion in this whole problem. So we know it's a proportion, and we know it's a one proportion z-test. So for the test part, one proportion or one sample, so it's one. So in terms of what that looks like in the calculator, that's one prop z-test. And that'll be our fifth choice once we get to that part in the calculator. And we've got everything else labeled nicely for us in the problem. So we need to write our null and alternative hypotheses for this example. And in this case, we said that 60% of students prefer online classes. So that's going to be our p-value for the null hypothesis, is that it's what the claim said. So we're going to write that p is equal to 60%, which we'll write in its decimal form. And our alternative hypothesis just asked if it's different from the college's claim, didn't say higher or lower. So we're going to say that P is not equal to 60%. Okay. So test statistic, whenever we're talking about a proportion, it's going to be a z-test. So we know the test statistic is going to be a z. And from the calculator, we're also going to get ourselves a p. So for the calculator, we're going to hit the stat button. We're going to arrow over to tests, and we're going to go down to the fifth choice, the one proportion z-test. When you hit enter, the first thing it's going to ask for is that p that we just wrote up in our hypothesis. So you're going to put 0.6 or 0.60. Either of them is good. The next thing it's going to ask for is the x value. That's going to be 84 for this problem. Then it asks for the n, and that will be 150. And then for the line where we have not equal to, less than, or greater than, because our alternative hypothesis is not equal to, we're going to select the first choice. And then we're going to arrow down to calculate. And when we hit enter, we get a z of -1. And our p-value is 0.3173. So not a particularly small p-value. We're testing this at an alpha equals 0.05 level, so that would be 5 pennies, and our p-value is almost 32 pennies. So our p-value is definitely bigger than our alpha. And so when your p-value is high, the null must fly. We're going to fail to reject our null hypothesis. So now to write our conclusion, we're going to say there is not sufficient evidence at the 5% level to suggest and then we go back up to our alternative hypothesis that the proportion of students who prefer online classes is different from 60%.